Hi, everybody. Welcome to Nature at School, our webinar series. Today, we're meeting with Karen Gourlay from Southeast Michigan as she takes us on an owl prowl. Take it away, Karen.
Thanks, Natalie. Hi, everyone. Today, we are going to learn all about owls, and I am going to share some great pictures of owls, and we can learn more about the owls around us. All right, so my name is Karen Gourlay, and I do work for the Michigan Department of Natural Resources in Southeast Michigan. Now, people throughout the ages have been fascinated by owls, and they've attached symbolism to them. You may have heard the term wise old owl, meaning that owls represent wisdom. Owls have also been seen as protectors and messengers, and they've appeared in stories and myths and legends throughout time. But today we are going to talk about owls and their role in our environment. So you may think that owls live in forests, and some of them do, but owls live all around the world in lots of different habitats. Some owls live in hot, dry places like deserts. Other owls live in cold, snowy places like the Arctic tundra. Some owls live in areas where there are lots of mountains, and some owls live in wide open areas with lots of fields. You might even spot owls in the city. Owls are birds and they lay their eggs in a nest. Some owls will nest in trees. Others nest in burrows under the ground. Some owls use abandoned buildings for their nest, and some will even use boxes that we can build and put out in our parks and yards. Today, we're going to talk about owls that live right here in Michigan. I live and work in Southeast Michigan, kind of between Detroit and Ann Arbor, and I hear and see lots of owls, but no matter where you are in Michigan, you can hear and see lots of owls too. Let's talk about some of the common owls around us. The most common owl in Michigan and in the whole United States and North America is the great horned owl. This is a very large owl, bigger than a crow, and they can live in lots of different habitats. So you might see them in woods or fields, in farms or parks, or in yards. And if you look at this owl, the first thing you might notice is its big, bright yellow eyes. It also has feathers that stick up on its head, kind of like horns, and that's how it got its name. Let's listen to how this owl sounds. Maybe you've heard great horned owls calling outside at night. If you hear two of them calling back and forth, the male has the lower, deeper voice, even though the female is a larger bird. And that's common amongst birds of prey. The female bird is often up to a third larger than the male. These owls are mostly nocturnal and they're considered fierce predators. They'll eat small rodents and birds, but they'll also take larger mammals like opossums and rabbits and porcupines and even skunks. Sometimes great horned owls will even attack and eat other owls. These birds begin nesting in the winter, often in January or February, and they use the nests of other birds rather than building their own nest. They prefer to nest in trees or snags, often out in the open, no matter what the weather. The female will lay the eggs and incubate them or sit on them, and after the babies hatch, those baby owls or owlets are fed by their parents. Their parents will bring food to the nest until these baby owls are big enough to fly on their own. They still depend on their parents even after they learn to fly. It takes a while for a great horned owlet to mature, and they will stay with their parents in the spring and in the summer until they become more mature and able to take care of themselves in the fall. Our next owl in Michigan is the barred owl. And this is another large owl, a little bit smaller than a great horned owl, but still larger than a crow. And you can see that it can be found all over Michigan and the eastern United States, and it's starting to expand westward into the Pacific Northwest. If you look at this owl, you can see that it has big dark brown eyes and a rounded head, and the feathers on its chest are striped or barred, and that's how it got the name barred owl. Let's listen to what this owl sounds like. Barred owls are a little bit more particular about their habitat. They prefer large, unbroken forests, often near water, and they'll eat small rodents and other animals, and even some aquatic animals, especially if they are near water. They prefer to nest in tree cavities and will even use large nesting boxes if you provide one. Again, the female sits on the nest and incubates the eggs, and they hatch after about 30 days. And then those nestlings stay in the nest for about another 30 days. You might wonder what this owlet is doing. Sometimes those baby owls will fly to the forest floor, but they don't have enough strength to fly back up into their nest. And barred owls will often climb trees using their talons and their beaks and flapping their wings until they get all the way back up to their nest, where they can spend the rest of the day or sleep at night. Barred owls are pretty sedentary, meaning they stay in the same territory all year round. But if there's a great horned owl nearby, they might relocate. Those two kinds of owls compete for the same kinds of food. And the great horned owl is a little bit bigger and a little bit heavier and might attack and drive off the barred owl. Our next owl is a very small owl. This is the northern saw-whet owl, and they prefer dense forests with lots of trees. These guys are so small, they're only about 7 or 8 inches big, and you can see, compared to the size of this person's hand, just how small that saw-whet owl is. They've again got the big round eyes that have kind of orangish or yellowish around the sides, and they've got barred or striped feathers, just like some of the previous owls we've looked at. They're very active at night, and in the daytime, they prefer to roost in evergreen trees, sometimes just above eye level. So if you're lucky, you might see a saw-whet owl. This owl often migrates a little bit in the wintertime. So in Michigan, you'll see it commonly up north all year round, but in the southern part of the state, you might only see them in the wintertime. Let's listen to the unusual call of this owl. I bet you never thought an owl would make a noise like that. That sound reminded early settlers of the sound of a saw being sharpened on a whetstone. And so that's how it got the name saw-whet. Now, since they're very small owls, they eat very small prey, things like mice and other little animals. And they also nest in tree cavities, or they'll use small nest boxes if you have one in your yard. The female sits on the eggs and hatches the babies, but she'll only stay with the young owls for about 18 days, and she'll fly away and find somewhere else to roost, and the male will finish raising the babies until they're old enough to fly. Now, because this is a small owl, it has to watch out for predators, and the main predator of a saw-whet owl are larger raptors like hawks and other owls. And now we have the eastern screech owl, and this owl is found everywhere east of the Rockies. In Michigan, it's mostly found in the lower peninsula and rarely seen in the upper peninsula. This owl prefers open woodlands and parks and neighborhoods with lots of trees. It's a little bit bigger than a saw-whet owl, maybe about the size of a robin. And you can see that the screech owl has 2 color phases. The gray color phase on the left is the more commonly seen, and the red color phase in the center of the pictures is a little bit less often seen. Maybe only about 25% of screech owls are that red phase. These guys are very active at night, and they eat lots of different things like small birds and mammals. They'll eat insects and worms and even frogs and bats. I have two different calls to play of the eastern screech owl. Let's listen to the first one. And sometimes the eastern screech owl sounds like this. An interesting thing about the screech owl is that it can change the volume of its voice. So if you hear a screech owl and it sounds really quiet and far away, it might actually be close by. Now, these owls will also use a nesting box in your yard, and the female does not hunt while on the nest. The male brings all the food to the female and to the young after they're old enough to start eating. You can sometimes find owls during the day by paying attention to other birds. They'll do a behavior called mobbing. So small birds like chickadees or even blue jays might be making a lot of noise and a commotion around a tree that would be warning other birds there's a predator nearby. So if you see that kind of behavior, take a look at what they're mobbing, and it might be an owl or another type of raptor. There are a few other birds or owls in Michigan that are a little bit less commonly seen. These are all medium-sized owls. The short-eared owl, the long-eared owl, and the barn owl are very seldom seen because they are either on the endangered or the threatened species list. We also have a few owls that are Michigan visitors. They don't nest here or live here year-round, but they'll be here sometimes in the winter. The snowy owl nests high up in the Arctic, and in years where they have lots of babies, some of those young owls will move further south in search of food. So you might see them here in the wintertime. The great gray owl, the northern hawk owl, and the boreal owl all nest in Canada and are occasional visitors to the Upper Peninsula. So now that we've talked about what types of owls live here in Michigan, what features can help an owl to survive? Owls have special adaptations. Those are physical features or behavioral traits that improve an organism's chances of survival in its environment. An example is camouflage. This owl blends right into its surroundings because its color is similar to the color of the tree bark that's behind it. Owls are nature's perfect mousetrap. We're going to look at some other adaptations to talk about how owls are successful at catching and finding their prey. So the first adaptation is sight. You can see this owl has large yellow eyes. Why do you think an owl has such big eyes? Their eyes are, in relation to their skull, pretty big. If you look at my video feed, you can see the eye sockets on this owl skull are large compared to the size of its head. If our eyes were as big as an owl's eyes compared to the size of our skulls, they might be as big or bigger than tennis balls. Can you imagine having eyes as big as tennis balls? Another interesting thing about owls' eyes is their shape. Our eyes are round and they have muscles that help us to look from side to side and up and down without moving our heads. You might want to try that at home. Try looking side to side without moving your head. Your eyes are round and the muscles help them to move. And owls' eyes are shaped more like a tube, kind of like this. So their eyes are fixed in their eye sockets and they can't move them from side to side. So pretend you're an owl and make your eyes kind of like tubes. Now to see from side to side, you have to turn your whole head one side to the other or up and down to see around you. To help owls, to look all around them, because their eyes are fixed, they have extra bones in their neck, more than people do. So they can actually turn their heads all the way around to look behind them without moving their bodies. Some owls can turn their heads 3/4 of the way around in a circle just to see what's going on. They also have a blood pooling system in their necks that help to keep blood circulating to their brain if they turn their head all the way to one side or another. The next thing we can talk about is an owl's hearing. You might think, looking at that owl picture, that ears are on top of their heads, but those are just feathers. Their ears are on the sides of their heads, just like our ears. And if you look at the picture of the owl's skull, you can see that one ear opening is higher and the other ear opening is lower. Imagine if you could hear the tiniest of sounds and know exactly where that sound came from. The position of an owl's ears help it to do that. An owl in a tree can hear a mouse under leaf litter or snow. And they also have feathers around their faces that help to funnel the sound in towards their ears. If you hold your hands behind your ears, then you can hear the sounds in front of you much better. And that's what the feathers around the owl's face help to do. It funnels the sound back towards their ears. Now let's talk about how owls fly. They have broad wings with flat surfaces. I have an owl wing right here with me, and you can see how broad and wide it is and how flat it is. That helps the owl to glide without doing too much flapping, and that helps it to keep quiet when it's flying. Another cool feature is the feathers on that wing. I have an owl feather right here, and the top of the owl feather, the leading edge, is toothed, kind of like a comb. So the edge of it looks a little bit like a comb, and that breaks up the air currents into microcurrents, so it's a lot quieter when it flies. The lower edge of the feather is tattered, kind of like a piece of cloth that's been torn. So that also helps to muffle the sound on an owl's feathers when it's flying. I have an owl mount here that I can show you. And another part of the sound quieting feature is that the owl has feathers that are soft and downy along its feet and under its wings. And that also helps to absorb some of the sound. So now you know that an owl can fly very quietly when it's sneaking up on some prey. Here's a picture again of how those feathers work. Comb-like edges on the front of the feathers, tattered fringe feathers on the back of the feathers, and then soft downy feathers on the body and legs to help absorb more sound. Here's a close-up picture of an owl feather, and you can see those comb-like projections that stick up along the edge. So once an owl sees and hears its prey and quietly flies up to catch that prey, what other adaptations does that owl have to help it catch and eat the prey? First of all, owls have talons on their toes, and talons are like long, sharp toenails. An owl has 4 toes on each foot, and normally when the owl is perching, 3 toes are facing forward and 1 toe faces back. But the owl has an ability to swivel that outside toe around to the back, so the 2 in front and 2 in back help it to grasp and catch its prey. It has a very strong grip force in its feet too, which means it can pierce organs and sever the spine to help kill the prey that the bird wants to eat. Owls also have long hooked beaks that are very sharp, and they hook downward. This allows the owl to be able to grab that prey and swallow it. Now, owls are birds, and so they don't have teeth. They have other adaptations that help them to eat and digest their prey. Here's a picture of an owl's internal organs. So we can see, let me get the laser pointer, that an owl will eat its food, and it will travel down the esophagus and into the gizzard, which is kind of like the bird's stomach. When it's there, the prey item will dissolve, and all the digestible parts, like the organs and the muscle and the soft parts of that prey, will be digested and go down into the intestines. But because an owl is eating animals, it isn't able to digest the bones or the fur or the feathers. So those pieces of that prey will form into a pellet in that bird's gizzard. And the pellet will form over about 10 hours time and start traveling back up the digestive system. Now, as long as the owl has a pellet in its body, it can't eat any more food because it's blocking the way. So the owl will begin to cough up that pellet and spit it right back out so that the bird can then eat more prey items. Here's a picture of an owl pellet. And if you take it apart, you can find all kinds of tiny little bones inside. Here's an owl pellet that I have, and I did dissect one, and look at this tiny little bone that I found inside a different pellet. This is the leg bone from some small creature. So the owl will eat prey and digest the parts that it can and cough up the parts that it cannot digest. Owls are top predators of their environment. So what that means is that they are part of complex food webs. Predators depend on other animals to eat for food. And an owl is an apex predator at the top of its food chain, which means it also will eat other predators smaller than itself. And owl populations depend on prey populations. So when there's plentiful prey and a lot for the owl to eat, the owls will be more successful at raising babies and growing their population. But if there's not enough for the owls to eat, there aren't enough prey animals for them to eat, then that year they may not nest at all, or they may only raise one owlet. So as there are more prey in the environment, there are more owls, and as the prey numbers go down, the owl numbers go down as well. So now we know that owls rely on suitable habitat, and the populations rise and fall with prey species. But what can we do to help? We can support habitat by providing wild areas like fields and forests where owls can find food and shelter. We can also avoid using poison for rodents and reduce the use of insect pesticides. Those are things that owls eat. And if there's poison in the food that they eat, then that poison also gets into the owl. We can install nest boxes to provide additional nesting and roosting locations for owls. We can reduce unnecessary outdoor lighting at night so the owl is more successful at catching its prey. And we can help educate others all about owls. If you tell your friends and your family about owls, they'll be interested too, and they'll want to make sure that they take care of owl populations where they live. So with that, I am going to stop sharing, and I am ready to take questions.
Wow, you have a very excited audience today, so we've got quite a few questions. I think you're pretty excited to hear about owls. So number one, what is your favorite owl and why?
I think that my favorite owl is the screech owl because it's common and I see it all the time and it makes such unusual sounds.
I like the screech owl too. I hear him in my neighbor's yard all the time.
Yep.
Second one, this is more of a comment. One of our listeners was really excited to see the range map because they didn't realize that the great horned owl was in South America. So that was pretty neat for them to see. Mm-hmm. And then one of our listeners said they've seen plastic owls in people's homes or on their docks or their yards. Are they trying to attract owls? What's that about?
So those are trying to keep other birds and predators away. So if you put up a plastic owl, maybe it'll scare away sparrows that might be bothering your building or your boat or what have you. The trick is that other animals start to figure out that those are not real owls. So you have to move them around all the time.
Good clue. I like it. Good backyard management. Can an owl see in the daytime? Because you said many were nocturnal.
Yes, they can see very well in the daytime. Some owls actually hunt at the day during the daytime, like snowy owls and short-eared owls prefer to hunt during the day. They can control, just like we can control the amount of light that comes into our eyes by our pupils contracting and expanding.
And somebody saw a video where it looked like the owl legs were really long. They want to know if they're really as long as that video showed.
So yes, owls do have kind of long legs. Most owls, when they're perching, are sort of crouching or squatting, so their feathers cover their legs. But if you think about an owl trying to swoop in and capture a mouse, it needs to be able to reach its legs way out to grab that mouse before it gets to the ground.
Love them. They're one of my favorites. And then 2 more questions. What is the largest owl in the world, and do they make good pets?
Oh, so the largest owl in the world is called the Blakiston fish owl, and it is found in Northeast Asia. And they measure owls by their wingspan. That one has a 6-foot wingspan. In North America, the largest owl would be the great gray owl, and in Michigan, the most common owl, the great horned owl, is our largest owl. And then owls do not make good pets. I know that they're in books and movies, and it looks like they'd be easy and fun to have, but they can't stay in a little cage. They need a big aviary so they can fly all the time. They need regular bathing, so they need to be able to keep their feathers clean to fly. And you have to feed them live or frozen mice or things like that. After all of that is said, the other problem is that owls are illegal to keep as pets because they're protected by the Migratory Bird Treaty Act.
I think we're going to end on that. That's such a powerful message. So thank you, Karen,
Thank you.
for presenting with us today. Thanks, everybody, for joining us again for the Nature at School webinar series. And we hope you will go back on YouTube and watch more of them later.